of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming tonight. We just like to do an introduction of our audience members. Can we go through the group here and just introduce who you are? And
George, we'll start with you.
that'd be great.
George Dow, Finance Committee.
Amanda Wilson, third grade teacher at Howe Manning.
Paula Osborne, special education at Howe Manning.
Mary Eileen Walsh, reading teacher at Howe Manning.
Dale Marshall, nurse at Fuller Meadow.
And Natasha Bansfield, parent.
Thank you. Okay, do we have any remarks from the public?
Do I need to talk into the microphone? Or
Yeah, just so they can pick you up.
Sure. Hi, my name's Natasha Bansfield. I am a Middleton resident and parent. Currently I have 2 children at Fuller Meadow and 1 child at Howe Manning in preschool. And I am here tonight to bring to the school committee's attention the issue of the school lunches. Myself and a friend of mine, Alicia DePisa, we were able to meet with Mr. Morrison and Mr. Greenberg roughly a month ago to talk about some of the shortcomings of Whitson's, and I definitely felt like we were heard by both Mr. Morrison and Mr. Greenberg about some of the issues. I think sort of where we are, I know Mr. Morrison had met with Whitson's subsequent, and there were some things that were going to be fixed and worked on. I think sort of the bigger picture for us is that it's a 3-year contract, and we have the option to sort of step out of the contract in June, and we want to know as parents what we can do to make that happen. I do not want to see two more years with Whitson's. I can tell you my kids got bento boxes for Christmas, and I have $0 in my Whitson's account. I'm not buying any more food from them until things change. I actually printed out an article that I'm happy to share with everyone here. I know that we're not the only school system having issues. I know Brookline is currently having an issue. They just had to approve a $92,000 override because they're having the same problems. There's not enough kids buying lunch because the food's gross, and now the school system is having to put up more money to sort of fill in the gap, and I'm trying to prevent that from happening in Middleton. The more parents that I speak with, I feel like there's a lot of folks in this that have the same feeling. Before we met with Mr. Morrison, I put out a very not scientific SurveyMonkey survey just to see, is it just me, is it just my kids that are complaining, or the handful of people that I talked to. Between Middleton, Boxford, and Topsfield, we got 140 responses. 10% of parents are satisfied with the quality of the food, and the other 90% vary between highly disappointed or disappointed, or then there were some folks that didn't care either way, which you're going to get with any survey, I feel like. So I think the big sort of question that I have for this group is, I know that there's an RFQ coming in, I believe, March, April. What can we do sort of outside of that? Is there, beyond having another vendor come in, which I realize is probably the fastest, easiest solution, is there any other possible solution, such as going back to having our own kitchen? Is that in the cards at all? Or, I mean, this is not a question to be answered right now, but just sort of
Rhetorical.
yes. So that was sort of where I am with it. Okay. Can I leave papers for anybody to look at?
Please.
Of course. Yeah. Okay.
I'm sorry.
I actually just printed out. This is the presentation agenda just for what Brookline Public Schools. This I think was dated November 29th, so it's fairly recent. This was just the article about Brookline Public Schools. Whitson's was already removed from Boston Public Schools, and then Mr. Greenberg and Mr. Morrison have already seen these photos, but just to sort of give you, I don't know how familiar everybody is here with the food, but this is what's on the Whitson's website, like these amazing meals, and then this is these are some photos from the Fuller Meadow cafeteria. So pretty different, what we've been sold and what we're actually consuming. It was interesting to talk to, listening to my children talk to my parents on the phone over Christmas. My parents had asked, how's school going, how's things? And my son said, second grader says, I love it. I love the school. The only thing I don't like is lunch. I'm like, well, that's actually pretty good. I mean, but lunch is a major part of their day. And it makes me a little bit sad as a parent to be telling my kids to eat healthy, nutritious food and telling them that this is healthy, nutritious, organic food. It's not. It's not. And I know that we can do better. So I'm hoping to, with the help of the school committee in the Tri-Town, to sort of figure out a plan and move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do you want to, did you have articles? Oh, you got to leave that
Yeah,
there.
I'm just
Great.
gonna leave that
Just
in.
slide that down to Matt and he'll pass it over. Thank you very much.
for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Reports from other committees?
Start time, hopefully that committee is coming back together in the month of January with some recent information from our vendor, NRT, who provides our local bus services. And they have been working on looking at SBC's data, School Bus Consultants' data, to try to figure out if the data from School Bus Consultant will work on the ground, so to speak, with the native knowledge of how our operations work. So we're hoping to pull that committee back together. All the chairs sit on that committee, I think, in mid-January or so we'll have more information to share at that time. And then the communications subcommittee, we are able to now kind of turn our attention back to the website and our communications protocol and plans that we had started back at the end of last school year. As you guys may recall, School Brains and ASOP sort of took over the IT world, and we're only able to kind of now refocus back in on our website. So we'll have a communications subcommittee happening, I think, the third week in January. So more to come on that as well.
Okay. Anything else?
Nothing from our other committees, no.
Okay. Approval of previous minutes. Has anyone,
They're
have
in
you
the
guys had a
drive.
chance to look at that? It's in the drive. Under minutes meeting approval. 12/5/18. Anyone would like to make a motion to approve the minutes?
Give folks a second to look at them. Deep reading.
Very interesting meeting. We were here forever. This is our quick one.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Who would like to second that?
Give me 1 second. I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. So reports.
Yep, for report of the superintendent, thank you very much. And Kristen, thank you for filling in as chair tonight. I appreciate you sliding one chair over, so thank you very much for doing that. And we wish Amy well. I know she's not feeling too well tonight. Just a quick update. We had this on the last agenda, but I was engaged in the Masco process that night in terms of their search for their superintendent, so I wasn't able to report on this that night. So we had our Design 39 visit. In the drive, there is a brief slideshow which will take you through It says 12, 13, 18. It's the Boxford School Committee presentation because we presented back at Boxford. But just to give you a quick overview of that trip, as you may recall, we learned about Design 39 through a visit to a nationwide conference on Association for Supervision and Curriculum Development. It was a national conference. Steve Goditis, Christine Elliott met the Design 39 folks there. We were able to send some teachers from Boxford out to that site in San Diego to visit this school. It was a public school that is doing all the things that we're talking around in terms of project-based learning and social-emotional learning and inclusive practices as sort of the three items that we've been talking about this year. If you go to that slide 4, their vision statement was life-ready thought leaders elevating humanity. And they really had on slide 6 there a design thinking approach to how they pursued their units of study within school. I think what was most interesting, if you scroll down to like slide 9, students were involved in authentic, complex problems, and they were solving problems that were real to their communities, and they were engaging the standards that were put forth by the state of California into those projects. They're really integrating it into the project. And so this young lady here was working on, there's a beach called Moonlight Beach out in San Diego, and she was working with an organization called 4Ocean, and the 4Ocean organization is trying to remove the big garbage patch that's in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. She had taken this on as a project she was a 7th or 8th grade student, and she was working with other students in her grade, and they were learning about the oceans and doing something authentic around the work that they're doing, engaging in critical thinking, reasoning, and problem solving, and all the skills that we've been talking about as a committee that we know we need to have our students be prepared for. And so that was really the main gist of that, is that they have embedded a lot of the work that we've been talking about in terms of project-based learning, social-emotional learning, and inclusive practices into their school. It was a well worth of our time to visit. The teachers came back and presented to the Boxford School Committee in terms of, sort of what our next steps are. And there's a group now that's currently meeting around some of these ideas. And, we'll continue to have the conversations in the other 2 towns as well around those 3 sort of big items with project-based learning, social-emotional learning, and inclusive practices. So all in all, a very positive and productive visit, and it really is informing really the work that we're doing in all 3 towns to help prepare our kids, as we've said in the past, for their future and not our past. So more to come on that as we make our way through the budget process, particularly at our Saturday meeting. You'll see that a lot of our budget requests and things are associated closely with social-emotional learning and associated with project-based learning and the inclusive practices as well that Matt is working on in his department. So much more to come on that. And then a few program updates to provide to the committee, one having to do with buses, one having to do with Global Child, and then talk a little bit more about the meeting that Natasha and Alicia and Steve and I had as well. And so from these program updates, buses, we've had our share of bus events over the course of the fall in terms of some behavior things happening on buses and situations that have happened on buses that have been, a little more uncommon than they have been in past years. I would say to you that we often try to make database decisions. That's the way to look at a problem, and we can do that certainly with the buses. And so I met with both James and Diane and asked them, from a bus report perspective, the bus drivers, as we know, fill out bus reports when there's a situation on the bus and it gets reported into the school. And from a bus report perspective, what was interesting is that bus reports are actually down from the year previous. So the actual slip that comes into the office from the bus driver that says, Kristen wasn't behaving on the bus today, and so on and so forth. We keep track of that data. And the bus reports are down, but we notice that the complaints are up, right? So reporting is down, but the complaints are up. I think calls are coming in, whether it be at the end of the day or whether it be at the start of the next day that, this happened on a bus. And, oftentimes maybe a bus driver doesn't catch it because the bus driver is obviously trying to drive the bus and make sure the kids get from point A to point B in a safe manner. So the other thing that I had asked Steve to look into with NRT, are our bus drivers the same? Because that's often another data point, like maybe you have new drivers and they don't know the routes and they don't know the kids and so on and so forth. And when we did the comparison from 17-18 to 18-19, of the 10 bus drivers, 8 of them are the same. Actually, 8 of them are the same and 2 of them are different. So we've only changed out 2 bus drivers on the Middleton route. So it's a function of us looking at, and we'll talk about this a little bit further in the agenda, maybe piloting some different ideas to collect more data to see how that informs some of the difficulties and challenges that we're seeing on some of the buses. Certainly the principals work very, very closely with the students who are riding the bus and are always in contact with parents, but oftentimes buses are that place where it is the extension of the school day. It's a little bit more of an unstructured environment. And, you know, maybe after a long school day, kids have a little bit of more of a challenge of maybe, you know, following all the rules to a T as they may be during the school day. So something that we have a close eye on. We'll talk about it a little bit further when we get down to new business. We're going to propose to the committee the idea of piloting a bus monitor or a bus monitors, whatever the will of the committee is, to see what impact that has on behavior on the bus and to see if our you know, behavior situations that are occurring on the bus start to decrease. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in the new business section. Global Child, we'll also talk about that a little bit more in our new business section as well. The Global Child numbers, we had reached out to Diana? Yep, thank you. We had reached out to Diana from Global Child. And so Kristen and myself, James, Christy met, I think, no, maybe?
She was-
Okay,
yeah.
Kristen,
It was, yeah.
three of us?
the
Okay.
three of us.
There were a lot of meetings. Yes, lots and lots of meetings. So we had a good phone call or good meeting with Diane. I think, Kristen, we had you on call that day. In Middleton, if we go back and look at the Middleton numbers, fall of 15, we had 88 students enrolled in Global Child. Spring of 16, 51. Fall of 16, 34. Spring of 17, 24. Fall of 17, when it started to be partially funded by Middleton School Committee, it was back up to 48. Spring of 18, partially funded by Middle School Committee, was at 45. And then this fall, we did a fuller funding of the program, and it was up to 72 students, because as you guys may recall through the budget process, we had identified about $10,000 in the budget process to support the Global Child program, and the numbers went back up to 74. So that funding is now gone for the spring semester. And so another item that will come up in the new business section, and Amy and I had some conversations about this as well, which I'll share with the committee when we get down to new business, is do we look to, if it's the will of the committee, to do any sort of funding within the current footprint of our budget for any programs in the spring to offset any of the cost. It was a $10,000 amount the past time. There was an increase in student participation in the program, but I don't know if that meant an equally balanced increase in student excitement about being in the program, maybe is probably the best way to say it. So we had enrollment numbers up, but I don't know if every child was totally wanting to maybe be within that program. And it may have been a function of, it was something that was now a reduced cost, so it maybe have been looked at as something that would offer an extended day for some kids, but it might not have been an extended day program that they were necessarily interested in. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in our new business in terms of, you know, Diana has reached out to me a few times wondering, will the school committee be able to provide any funding for the spring semester, so I do want to get back in touch with her. And, you know, continue data collection on that as well in terms of enrollment, obviously, and enrollment when funded. If we look at the other two towns, enrollment is more in the range of, if I look at Boxford, anywhere between, over the past year or 2 years, 17 and 32. If I look at Topsfield, it's the same, anywhere between like 12 and 38 or 16 and 38 or so. So that seems to be the range. And that was sort of the range in Middleton. I would say we're at like 34, 24. And then when we started to have some partial funding by school committee, it went up. And then when we had full funding by school committee, it almost close to doubled.
Does Boxford or Topsfield fund at all?
They do not, Steve, correct? It's not within the budget footprint
Not within their
in the
budget.
other two towns.
That's correct.
Yeah. So something we'll touch upon more when we get down to new business. Those are sort of the two items in new business, possible pilot of a bus monitor, and then determining what, if any, sort of funding we may want to designate to Global Child in the spring. And then the last is to follow up on Natasha's conversation as well. We did have a positive and productive meeting with Natasha and Alicia, two of our Middleton parents, both on the Wellness Committee. Talked a little bit about menu and some of the deliverables from Whitson's. Steve and I then subsequently Joe Armenti, who, I don't know Joe's exact title, but I think sort of regional director
Regional manager, yeah.
of Whitson's, and then Myra, who was our local director in all three towns. She had our, questions with them and any concerns that we may have had around menu and options for kids, and what they've put together for January are some different ideas to be responsive to some of the concerns that we had raised in terms of taking some of the second choices. I think one of the things we had talked about when we met was that, kids could stitch together sort of a chicken and hot dog, kind of a week if they wanted between the two meals. And, Joe and Myra heard that, and I think they're making some changes to the menu to try to avoid that sort of stitching together of the chicken and hot dog meals, adding more fruit and veggies to the Overall program, on the available daily menu, they'll continue to offer a turkey sandwich, a sun butter sandwich, a yogurt parfait, a garden salad, and a bag of lunch. On the a la carte menu, they've added a crudité cup with dip and a 4-ounce yogurt with fruit and granola as options. And then what they're trying to do is, as I said, not stitch together sort of the chicken and hot dog lunch all the way through. And so adding like a vegetarian melt pizza on one of the days. On 1/24/19, a Tasty Tuesday recipe is being served, roasted pepper and chicken with pasta, which is new this year, and then a chicken and vegetable rice bowl. They do continue to offer the chicken patty as a second choice, but they're also going to offer like a meatless Monday menu item. On a breakfast with lunch Tuesdays, they took the hot dog off as a second choice and added a chicken Caesar wrap. On Wednesdays, they kept whole grain chicken nuggets as a second choice, but offering pasta meal as the first choice. So trying to be responsive to, the concerns that we brought to their attention. And I think like anything else, it's like we said with the buses and with Global Child, sort of that data, look at the data, let that help us. And I think Steve has some data today in his report on food service program participation. And then on top of that, seeing like as we go through the month of January, what's the participation rate with some of those meals, right? As we put these new and different offerings out there, what are some of the participation rates as well? So certainly something that we have an eye on and we'll continue to monitor as we make our way through with Whitson's. So those are our general program updates.
Okay.
And I think Mr. Greenberg,
you.
you're welcome, can add to that with his financial report and also food services update.
Good evening.
Good evening, Steve.
Happy New Year. Included in the drive, and I believe I emailed out, was it before Christmas? I'll make sure you guys had something like some type of financial report, Christmas present.
Put it under the tree. So fun to watch, yeah. Thank you.
Well, I want to make,
Read it.
Everything's moving on track. There's nothing really surprising, but there are the usual areas that we're watching. Special education. We are going to have discussions, as Dr. Morrison mentioned, with regard to transportation and possible implementation of a couple pilot options or a pilot option. We'll be looking at Global Child to see if we want to engage in any type of continued investment in Global Child from the district standpoint. Also, if I haven't already said it, the health insurance, we want to keep an eye on that. We budgeted for a 10% increase in the premium. It came in at 11. It's not the end of the world kind of thing, but we do want to keep an eye on that as we progress through the fiscal year. But as always, we keep an eye on special education, not from a negative context, it's just the nature of the business within special education. So I will entertain any questions that the committee may have. No?
The second page here, are you also going to go over the food service report, or are you just?
Yeah, I'm gonna go over that next.
Okay, we'll wait till you get there.
All right. Any questions? No? Okay. Well, if at any time the committee has any questions with regard to the financials or financial disposition of the district, please do not hesitate to let me know. The second document that was included in the drive is just a brief report with regard to participation and within the program for FY19, comparing it to FY18. It goes through November at this point, as we haven't received the December data yet. Once we do, we'll update the document. Looking at it briefly, you can see that for the month of November, we've sold 502 more type A meals. This does not include any a la carte. A la carte is not factored in the counts. All right, so this is information that comes right from the DESI website as far as meals that we sell. Overall, to date, we've sold 2,620 more meals than we did in FY18. And as far as on the revenue, which does include the a la carte, this is all revenue and all expenses for the program that are posted on their invoices. So we do, okay, this is all the revenue, these are all the expenses. You can see that at this point in time, we're $569 or $570 to the good, positive, whereas at this time last year, we were about $4,800 in the hole, a deficit. And for a little historical context for the committee, because there are members that were not here, when we went through the guideline changes, when the DESI put in and the federal government put in the guideline changes, all of the programs that I work with, Boxford, Middleton, and Topsfield, they all took large hits. And what I mean is we had healthy balances in reserve, to mitigate small losses over the course of a long period of time. But what happened was those small losses went from like a few $1,000s to $20,000 or $30,000 and ate up all of the reserves. So, no pun intended with the wording. But, so we look at this and we're starting to see a positive turn based upon the numbers. But there is communication with regard to perspective of the program, and that needs to be taken, seriously, and then we go from there. But I will stop and answer any questions that the committee may have.
So this goes back to 17. Were the numbers similar in 16 and 15?
Before Whitson's, we had yeah. I think with Whitson's,
I remember the whole
the
thing.
experience, but
Yeah.
before Whitson's, when we were all in-house and the guidelines changed, we tanked. We went down really bad. And that's how we got to the point where we needed to subsidize the program through the operating budget, because we didn't have anything in reserve.
Yeah, I remember it being $20,000 negative one year.
Yep.
Questions for Steve?
Well, thank you.
So new business.
Okay.
So new business, we have, following up from our previous conversation around bus monitor, global child, and then FY20 budget. And I think the Whitson's conversation will certainly be part of, the bigger FY20 budget conversation that we have as we make our way through that process. So bus monitor pilot, as we have talked about, and as I mentioned in the previous report, we do have some situations that are occurring that, are creating distractions on the bus for our drivers. And we've seen, as I said, less of an increase in terms of reports from bus drivers, but more an increase in terms of complaints that are happening from families around the bus. And so one of the things that we wanted to propose to the committee is a pilot of a bus monitor. And the bus monitor would be somebody that, what we would do, we would see as an existing assistant. It wouldn't be a new hire. That's almost an impossible position to fill, because you're saying to somebody, hey, we'd like you to work, 90 minutes in the morning and 90 minutes in the afternoon, and, get to point A to point B and so on and so forth. And I think in conversations with James and Diane, what we would do is see if there's an existing paraprofessional who would want to start their day a little bit earlier and their day a little bit later, and then just sort of be, on the bus, tracking and monitoring and so on and so forth. And as I said to Amy when she and I talked about this a little bit, I think, again, let's do some data collection. Let's not say we're going to do a pilot, monitor for the rest of the school year. Let's try it for a month or 6 weeks or 7 weeks or something like that, or through February vacation. Let's pick a bus or 2 buses. And if they're buses that have had, maybe more action than a different bus, that might be a good place to try it. And have the monitor on the bus and see if we have any decrease in terms of some of the interactions that we're having. And so we wanted to bring that to the committee tonight to sort of discuss and deliberate and see if it's something that you wanted to pursue. From a cost perspective, Steve could supply the dollar amount to it, but I can tell you that it would be the hourly rate of the paraprofessional times whatever the time on the bus would be in the morning, and times whatever the time on the bus would be in the afternoon, times the number of days. So from an expense perspective, it wouldn't be a huge expense for a pilot, but it would give us some real data to kind of look at to see if we're seeing a decrease in any concerns that are happening on the bus.
Scott, I have a few questions.
Sure.
So, with the reports and then the complaints.
Yeah.
What are the percentages in terms of morning versus afternoon?
Yeah, it's a good question. Keep going, and I'll find that for you.
That was my first one. Now I gotta remember what my second one was. How many buses are seeing the issues?
Yeah, it's, I would say probably 2 buses right now are kind of emerging.
Primarily 2.
Yeah, primarily 2. I don't have the AM and PM, I just have I could get that for you. That'd be easy enough to get.
I asked the AM versus the PM because of the bus monitor cost.
Yeah.
Right, so you had said earlier that typically after a full day
Yep.
of listening,
Yep.
a little hard
Yep.
to continue. So the theory
Yeah.
would be that the afternoon is where the issues might lie.
So good working theory, and that could be part of the data collection, right? Do you start it in the afternoon, right? And then expand it to the, I think that's all part of what we wanted to deliberate and discuss with you guys tonight was, is that an approach that we want to take? And that would be a good one.
And is it, I don't know if you know this from the data yet, but is it typically incidents are happening in the back of the second back of the bus versus the children that are near or visible to the bus
Yeah.
driver?
Yeah. I would need James and Diane for that, to have that level of detail.
And have we thought about cameras?
There are cameras on the bus.
Cameras on the bus.
And that's a conversation we're actually having with the provider. Camera's a great idea. The cameras are an older technology at the moment, and they're not very reliable, I would say. I mean, I think this is certainly going to be, that's going to be part of the bigger conversation that I have with Steve when we put out our bus bid, because our bus contract expires, Steve, at the end of this year or the end of next year?
End of FY '20.
End of FY '20. And so we have found the cameras to be spotty. Sometimes they get the video, sometimes they don't get the video, and so that hasn't been the most reliable reporting.
The other question that I just thought of is, I know my children tell me that they have to sit by grade. I don't know if there's other ways to do the seating. I don't know if they would be better or worse,
Yeah.
right? I'm just wondering.
Yep. Yep.
Put the sixth graders closer to the front as opposed to the back.
Right.
Great questions.
And that's, yeah, very good questions. Hard for a bus driver to monitor.
Completely.
Yeah, 'cause even if you
My
start
kids are
that-
on one of the buses who I don't think are in the two,
Right.
have been, it's been unruly.
Because when we look at some of the videos, you see kids will move seat, like, oh, my friend just got on, I'll slide up there, and, so it's a bit of a challenge for the driver to, I would say, try to manage,
Yeah, and it's fine
some of those
unless,
pieces.
unless it's those two buses, then the kids are problem.
Yeah.
Are you done? At town meeting, they talked about senior citizens volunteering to offset their taxes.
Yep.
Can we use them in this case to be monitors?
I think we'd be open to all possibilities. I think off the bat, Mark, I think what we want to do is try to just have somebody internal, because we could probably get that person up and running much quicker, as opposed to getting someone in on payroll or through the system. I know it wouldn't be necessarily paid if it's a tax credit, but getting them through the system and core and fingerprinted and all that. So to get sort of an immediate response for an initial data collection period, I think we'd want to go with somebody in-house. But I think if we decide that this is something that works, and as we start to have the FY '20 budget deliberation, and we say like, yeah, maybe, we funded X last year, maybe this is something we want to fund on the buses, open to all ideas. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Steve, cost-wise, hourly rate times number of days,
yeah,
times para.
Right, and so I used like a $20 an hour, so let's say it was 2 hours, times number of days. If we, for budget, for the FY '20 budget, for example, I said, okay, if we're gonna do all the buses, $20 an hour, 2 hours a day, times 180 days, came to a little over $70,000 for all of the buses. I think, I could be off, I think I did one more bus than I needed, but then again, we may need adding a bus, so that's in
That'd
there.
be every day, every run, morning and
Yes,
afternoon.
yes.
Yeah,
That's what it would be.
that would
So
be
it's
if we did
worst case
it
scenario.
for FY.
Yes,
Yeah,
if
but
you're gonna, yes.
Yeah.
Well, we're talking about 2 buses.
Just as a pilot. I just want to do a little, we talked with Amy when we were talking about it, Steve and I met with
Mm-hmm.
Amy, like, let's just collect some data. Like, let's
Yeah.
do some data collection and see, do we see does it have an impact? Steve, actually, you put something out on your listserv, so we all have our local
Yes.
listservs, or I can email every superintendent in the state and say, ask a question. Steve can email his business associates and ask a question.
The only monitors that were ever used are for when we have special education vans, or they have special education vans, and that type of support is needed in the vehicle, but not for regular day transportation. No one came back and said that we have monitors on regular day transportation.
Did you get a few, though, who were like, oh, if you do it, let us know, though? Because I think there's some people who are
There's
thinking about
always
it.
people like,
Yeah.
not yet,
Right.
Yeah.
So we get that, but Dr. Morrison is correct. But no, to get right to it, nobody is doing it that responded back for regular day transportation.
Would,
Good.
would the town bill us for the offset taxes as a school department?
Say that one more time, Mark.
If we're using a senior citizen?
Yeah.
Would we then get billed by the town? Would we still end up, would that be out of our budget to offset theirs? How's the bookkeeping part of that work?
Steve would have to connect with Sarah on that.
Yeah, I don't know.
George, you know?
I'd have to ask her. Yeah.
Yeah, the town appropriates,
So just identify yourself as the FinCom rep so people know.
yeah, George Dow, Finance Committee.
Okay.
The town appropriates, I forget the sum, but it's a sum of money to fund the tax write-off, work-off program. So I don't,
Yeah, it wouldn't be, it wouldn't.
you know, I don't see why the town would build it with, since they already have money.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, we could connect with Sarah on that, but I think the bigger question is for the committee, you know, is that something you'd like us to pursue? And if so, what's the time frame you want to put on it for a pilot?
I feel very strongly that we move forward with this, and, you know, perhaps look at the buses with the higher incidents. I like the idea of, you know, sort of setting up expectations that we want from the bus monitor around, you know, the questions that Christy asked. Does it happen more in the morning or afternoon? You know, is it because of where the children are seated? Are there, you know, are there other opportunities that we could be looking at? So making it some sort of, you know, there are clear expectations that we have of the bus monitors. Personally, I would like to see it done morning and afternoon, at least for a month. I don't know if a month is a long enough time period.
We have about 3 months of existing data right now from this year, so if it's 2 months and it's the same patterns, or the pattern stops, in the policy handbook, does the driver, or do we have the ability to throw a kid off the bus temporarily or forever?
Yeah, that's a lever that principals have within the handbook. If someone is, you know, not following the rules of the bus, we have suspended kids from the bus, like you'd be suspended from, you know, a program or whatever the case may be. That's certainly something that does happen.
Yeah. I know it happened when I was a kid.
So what would be the protocol for a bus
Maybe
monitor
an example of me?
that sees something happening? Like, what are they
Yeah.
supposed to do?
Yeah.
So intervene, right? I mean, right away they would intervene. I think oftentimes presence is a big thing, right? Having been in education a long time, just being present. Things tend to not happen when you're just sort of there, because there's the chance that I might get in trouble, right? As opposed to a chance you don't get in trouble. And so if it's a school-based person, like we're talking about, seeing if there's somebody within the department currently, they would have the tools and the knowledge and the language to use to intervene in a situation. But the bigger piece would be to report back to the principals and let them know, this is what occurred on the bus today, these 2 students did X, Y, and Z, and you'd now have sort of a witness on the bus, right? Because oftentimes you're relying on the bus driver to give you the report when the bus driver's, you know, A, trying to drive, and B, trying to look in the back at the same time. So it would be sort of that person there, that presence there to, I think the presence alone, this is just my theory, right? The presence alone, I think we probably see a little bit of a reduction in terms of some of the behaviors that we're seeing. And even if we didn't, we would have a better ability to intervene and provide strategies for kids on how to react in situations like that.
So what is the issue? There are complaints, but we can't figure out the problems?
We're hearing that things are happening from parents when kids get home that we're not necessarily aware of because either the bus driver missed it or, you know, it happened in such a quick manner that, again, the bus driver couldn't see it or whatever the case may be, and then it's not getting reported back to the school, right? So like I said, the actual bus reports, the slips that we get, Freddie, from the bus driver, those are actually down, but the complaints, I would say, are up in terms of some of the interactions that are happening on the bus. And even some of the things the principals are hearing about. You know, they get a call like X happened on the bus and they look into it, and it's tough to kind of piece it together because you don't really have any data to work from.
Yeah, so what do you think a bus monitor would do?
Yeah. So again, I think the presence aspect of it, you'd see, you know, a lesser of a reduction. It's sort of like the air marshal sort of theory, right? If you knew there's an air marshal on the plane, then, you know, hopefully people tend to behave better. And so I think it's sort of that sort of theory of having another adult on the bus, another set of eyes on the bus, just to kind of be there and be present. Allowing for a little bit more structure to take place in the bus, maybe like Christy said, you know, being able to enforce, like, look, we're going to try this week. We're going to try 6th grade, 5th grade, 4th grade, 3rd grade, down to kindergarten. The theory behind 6th grade in the back and kindergarten up front is it allows for quicker loading and unloading, right? Kindergarten kids 5 years old with bags and things, getting up the stairs and walking the whole length of the bus and then sitting down That's a much slower process than a sixth grader quickly making their way to the back of the bus and then getting the bus to move to the next stop to get the kids into school on time. So it's a pretty tight choreography. It's not to say those things can't be done, but having somebody there to help facilitate it, I think would certainly allow us the opportunity to try those things.
Yeah, I just hope, I'm sure the problems are known. I just don't want the volunteer or, the chaperone just kind of holding the peace. If the problem is known, I think we should address the problem.
Yeah, and it is.
Not just try to
Absolutely.
make sure it just doesn't happen again.
Anything that, I would agree with you, anything that comes into the school, comes into James' office or Diane's office is, always addressed. Even if it doesn't come in via the bus report, knows just how it's supposed to come in, they still make sure that they have conversations with the kids and the parents and so on and so forth.
Okay.
You're saying sometimes it doesn't get to James or Diane?
Correct. What they know, they do address, but there are some that,
We're hearing from parents that it's
Yeah.
not getting there.
Who's hearing from parents?
school.
Not me.
But not,
Committee,
not the principals?
I think committee members have heard from some parents as well.
Oh, actually, we got an email, yeah.
And I think too, just have someone monitoring like the patterns of behavior. Is it bus driver related that's not being taken care of, or is it just certain children on the bus that, need to have special attention, or I think just to kind of nip some of these behaviors, by having someone on the bus monitoring them,
Yeah,
would be worth, exploring this, honestly.
I think the data would tell us too. I know a few years ago, there was a class that came through that had several unruly, the incident rates, both on the bus and in school, were higher than the previous 3 or 4 and the next 2 or 3. If that's the case, we just got another bad year with several, bad apples. We shouldn't have a $70,000 budget item because of a couple kids that.
Yeah, and I would say that's probably a bigger
Exactly.
conversation for the FY '20 budget. I agree with you, Mark. I think we can hash that out when we get to FY '20. I think for this year, I'm just looking at the calendar, there's about, and this is just something for the committee to consider, there's about 30 school days between now and roughly February vacation. So that's about a sixth of the school year, right? A 30-day time period. If you wanted to go, but starting on, Monday of next week through the 15th of January, that would be, again, about 30 school days. Do you want to do a trial run or a pilot in that time frame?
But to Freddie's point, has any kid been expelled from the bus? Because, usually there's like a 3-strike rule in most communities, right? Have any kids been told they can no longer take the
So
bus?
without getting into any sort of privacy things, I can tell you that the whole range of consequences that would be available to a principal all have been accessed in different situations. From someone
But
just
I don't think it's confidentiality, I hope, but have we been able to execute on saying someone cannot no longer be on the bus?
Correct.
Okay. So I think
Again, all
I think
incidents
to
are-
your point,
And that has not stopped the problem?
Correct.
Well, I guess we haven't revoked enough of the transportation privileges.
Always an option, yes, but it's, there's a level of egregiousness that would have to occur to get there, than sort of like the nickel and dime everyday behavior. That tends to happen more often.
Can't throw a kid off for a couple little incidences, or for a long period of time.
Correct.
Is that the day rate for a bus? For one bus? So what's it gonna cost for two
More discussion.
monitors for 2?
Are we ready? Do you guys want to make a motion to move forward with a bus monitor
Good point.
for the next 30 days?
So, yeah, so you're talking roughly 3 hours a day, right?
2 hours, right?
You're saying how much?
It was 2.
Well, I think you said 90 minutes in the morning,
20.
Yeah,
3
Steve,
hours a day, times 2.
24.
what would the run be?
So if we did 2 hours, so, just 2 hours a day times 2 people, times 30 days. Oops. Excuse me, 2 hours times 2 people times 30 days times $20 an hour. Yeah, $2,400, roughly.
24?
So I'd say, to be safe, not to, if you're voting on it, not to exceed $3,000.
Right.
If you're voting that, or if you're authorizing this at the superintendent's discretion, to institute a pilot, which may be a better,
Yep.
to give him and the principals a little more flexibility.
Hey, Freddie, just to touch upon one of the
How much
points.
did you say?
2,400,
2,400?
yeah, 30 days, 2 people, 2 hours.
So as long as the data collection's happening accurately and aggressively, I'm okay with it.
Absolutely. Freddie, just answer one of your points too, and Christie, one of the questions you raised, and Matt just reminded me of this, which is a good point. So why don't you make it, because you made the good point?
Yeah, it just is, when we were talking about the consequences of not being able to ride the bus, at any given point, just a clarification point, is that we're still required to transport that student to school. So it's not, it's a revocation of privileges to ride on the regular transportation. It does not take those privileges away from us getting the student to school. So we then look to alternative transportation, so we're still required to get them there.
Which is pretty expensive, way more expensive than a monitor.
I'm just looking at, Tri-Town School Union rules. Where does it say that, Matt?
That's a state regulation.
State law?
Yeah,
Can we override that?
that we cannot.
Yeah, it's so weird to me, because I know I've seen and heard of incidents where someone is removed from the bus, and then the parent has to bring them.
It's a choice given to every parent. They don't have to choose to access it, but we have to provide an option of then
I get you.
providing special
Even
transportation.
for the 3 days they get thrown off or whatever, the temporary?
Not temporary.
Oh, okay,
Permanent.
okay.
So Steve, to your point, you're saying 24.
As superintendent, if the school committee would allow superintendent discretion, even though we think it'll be around $2,400, just so that a thorough job can be done for any of those unanticipated things, as the principals and the superintendent work through when we work through it.
So moved.
Anyone second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Hold on one second.
And it's for 30 days.
30 days, yeah. So I will report back at our meetings, let you know what the results have been, short-term and longer-term.
Great.
Motion approved for 30 days.
And I'm just curious about communication. Would we communicate this to parents
Yeah,
of that bus? Okay,
absolutely. Yep,
Thanks, all right.
Of course, yep. Excellent, all right.
Okay,
Next
great.
item we have is Global Child. So as I had said at the top, committee last year in the FY19 budget had approved $10,000 for subsidizing the cost of the Global Child's, what do you call it, fee, I guess?
Yep.
For children to participate. And we had, what was the number, 78 or so students, 72 students registered completely, thus using the entire 10,000. And we did run into some situations where, or what was reported to us was that there were some situations where folks may have saw it as an opportunity for some extended day programming, but it might not have been a great match of extended day programming for some kids. And so the question is, does the committee want to provide any additional funding for the program during the spring semester? One of the things we had talked about when we met with Diana, and when Kristen and I talked about it, and when Amy and I had a conversation about it, was maybe subsidizing it at a lesser cost, so it's not a full tuition waiver. It would be a partial tuition waiver, something in the ballpark of around $2,500, and that would be that folks would have to pay, maybe a half or maybe a little bit more than half of the fee in order to participate in the program. And then along with that, is there some sort of contract that would be associated with it as well in terms of behavior contract? It is a after-school program. And so, asking Global Child to come up with some type of contract with the kids around, like Freddie had talked about on the bus or some of these other things, like a 3 strikes you're out kind of a thing, for participation in that program. So that's just another item for the committee to deliberate on tonight to see if there's any will or desire to continue subsidizing the program for the spring semester, which starts, I think, early February.
I think our after-school program is pretty reasonably priced, so that we shouldn't be subsidizing people to use this as a after-school program for free. But I like the fact that we're subsidizing it partially, because I think it adds to our school, but
Krista, we talked about the curriculum before. Do we have any more information on that?
Yeah, we did, Freddie. We talked when we met with Diana Thank you for that reminder. We met with Diana, talked a little about that because part of it was, I think, the CD-ROM aspect of it as well. And, I said that one of my comments to Diana was that that's, certainly a technology that's not widely accessed as much as it would have been in the past. I asked her if there was ever any movement on their end to go to an app-based module for Global Child. A lot of the like Duolingo and some of these other programs are using app-based things. I actually showed Diana there's a technology out there now that, if you spoke one language and I spoke a completely different language, or if you spoke Chinese and I spoke French, you could put a little piece in your ear and I could put a piece in my ear, and you could speak in, Chinese and I would hear it in French, and I could speak in French and you would hear it in Chinese. And so it becomes, does the programming within our schools then focus more on the culture of those environments as opposed to language, if you have a real quick ability to communicate, right?
Yeah.
Particularly where, from a language perspective, when we talked about this in the past for foreign language programs, it's hard to learn a language in, 30-minute, 40-minute increments, when it's not sort of strung together in a programmatic kind of a way, like math. We don't teach math 30 minutes every Monday for just the whole school year, right? Math is taught every single day. And so when you think about program development like that, what Diana said back to us was that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kristen, but my understanding was that on the back end there are people who are trying to work on an app-based module to help upgrade the curriculum and do some of the things that they're doing at Global Child, but it didn't seem to be anything, from my understanding, that was imminent.
Yeah, no.
See, you have your notes there, so.
There were
anything
a
else?
lot of attorney issues and a trade, I think it was
Yeah.
more like around the trademarking and, so yeah, she did not have a solution for that, but she heard us and,
Yeah. I just have to say,
spoke to it.
I have a few children in the system.
Yeah.
They've been taking it for a while, and, I think we learned more watching Dora than taking the class. So,
I feel like so same here, and I feel like some years and some semesters have been better than others, or sessions have been better than others. And, so I have a couple thoughts on this. I need to organize, but 72 students enrolled, right?
Yep.
So that shows that people are interested. If, maybe not the children, but the parents are interested. I'd hate to penalize the folks that enroll their children and are able to benefit from the subsidy that we provide. I like the idea, so that's one thing. I like the idea of doing some sort of contract or, giving, empowering the Global Child teachers, instructors, to be able to monitor behavior and address behavior. Because I felt like in our situation, personally, there was a instructor that struggled with monitoring and addressing significant behavior issues. Once that person was transferred to another class, it seemed like, granted we only had one class or two classes, that the kids actually got something out of it. So I do believe that it was maybe instructor related. So I think, I would like for Global Child to be a better service provider, in that, I think we need to, be very open with them around instructors and how well the program's going. But I would expect them to provide the same. And I feel like, personally, our session, the children wasted their time in it. So I would look to Global Child to somehow, reconcile that.
Are there competitive
yeah, how do we
programs?
hold them accountable?
Yes, so it would be, so we went back and forth on this because we're in a precarious position in that we're offering, school committee's funding this, and so we're offering it, but we're also funding it. So, I guess the question was, can you discipline these children? Can you remove them from the class if it's a school-sponsored program? What are our obligations in that regard?
A really dynamic teacher that's exciting and interactive is going to keep the kids' attention and probably not have behavioral problems, I'm guessing. I don't know. Is there a competitive product out there, a competitive program, other people putting these on besides the Global Child?
I think Global Child's probably one of the more well-known, Mark. I don't know if there's, I did ask Diana, I had sent her some follow-up questions afterwards. I said, how long has Global Child been working within each town? Fall of 14 in Boxford, spring of 14 Topsfield, fall of 15 for Middleton. I said, since the inception each town, what's been the growth in enrollment? And I shared that with you already. What's the hiring process for teachers within the program, and has it evolved over time? Global Child teachers are hired and trained by myself, this is Diana speaking, and the regional coordinators. All new hires must complete the mandatory training sessions held several times throughout the year. 90% of the teachers are native speakers. Non-native speakers must be fluent in the language they are teaching. Teachers are evaluated throughout the semester and given feedback. We look for those individuals that have experience with teaching or being around children of all ages. References are checked. Query forms completed for each town they teach in and fingerprinted in towns that require the process. My last question to her was, lastly, I know when we met, you indicated there were some students in the program that maybe had behaved in a way in which you had to intervene. Have you had to intervene with situations in some of the other towns as well? Middleton is not alone in me having to intervene with some behaviors. Usually a simple talk and a possible call to the family helps. In some circumstances, we've been notified by the school or parent about an issue of a specific child is having at school or home. We cannot seek this information necessarily. Global Child is providing classes for many years in over 20 towns, and I can only count on hand the number of children that have ever, had to be sort of like completely removed from a program, and we've not necessarily had that be a case here. I hope this information is helpful. Let me know if you have other questions. So just a little bit of background on, the program in our 3 towns.
Where I'm at right now is, and I've been a fan of subsidizing this, is that I want to see some modernization improvements before we do, and we can make that decision for the next year, and maybe make a partial subsidy at that point, but I'm not a fan of subsidizing it for this coming semester.
I feel like everything, I mean, you're the cutting-edge superintendent, right? Everything this school, our system, our whole school system's doing is, no, I'm serious, we're there, right? We're the forefront of it. Everyone's looking at what we're doing next, right? If our foreign language program is behind, we should be looking at a different one, or pushing them to upgrade it.
Yep.
And I think a very low or zero tolerance policy for behavior. This is an optional. This isn't. You don't have to be in this class.
Right.
There's no state law that says so. You're on your ear.
I guess that's a
2
good
strikes, you're
question.
out.
Are we? Yeah.
Well, yeah.
So, I don't know where this category falls under, but any program that receives funding from the public school needs to accommodate the needs of all students, right? So let's just talk about like an after-school program. So if you have an after-school program that is the school-sponsored after-school program, then every child has the right to attend that program. If it's a situation where the after-school program just rents space and, uses the gym and the cafeteria or whatever spaces, and they pay us rent, and it's not our program, then it's their program and we have nothing to do with it. So if it's a program that receives funds from the district, then it becomes, even if it's after school, it becomes a school-sponsored program. And if it's a school-sponsored program, then we need to put into place what is appropriate to meet the students' needs.
So I don't think the question is whether or not we want to offer it to all students.
Right.
That is our intention.
Yeah,
The concern is that there are students that are
Right, so you can-
participating
you
that
can
are
s-
not, that are not behaving.
Yep, so you can
Okay.
still have the exact same protocols and standards that you have for any activity, right?
Okay.
And there can be consequences for those. The only thing I would say to that is, those could be upheld for, where you might run into a conversation is if it's a special ed student who's having behaviors. What we would first do before they're removed from the program is try to figure out if we can help support that student during that program, just like we would do for anything else.
Okay.
Right, so there's potential we add an aide to the program, or we have the, BCBA or the behavior specialist spend some time there to help support that student. What it doesn't do is take away any of your protocols or rights to have a behavior matrix type of thing where if they're not participating in a program, then they can't be there.
And does it have to be the same behavior matrix that we're using?
It does not, no.
Okay.
No.
So we could set up our own.
Yeah, there can be different
Specifically
expectations
for
for
this.
that
Like the
program.
play has a contract, right? The-
Right,
the-
it's a
the
different-
play here at Howe Manning, the woman who runs the play, there's a quick contract,
Yeah.
expectation, sign, thank you,
Yeah.
done, kind of a thing.
But I would also say, if, just as a caveat to that, we're really talking about if the student is a non-special ed student who is not adhering to the behavior expectations of that program, then they are not entitled to continue along with that program. We're talking about special ed students who are attending the program and maybe having some difficulties with that. We would have to get involved and spend some more time.
Sure,
on
yeah,
that.
of course.
So it's kind of both.
Okay.
Did this happen before we had a full subsidization?
Our numbers have gone way up, Mark, almost by double.
No, I understand.
Since the full subsidy.
Has the behavioral component of this?
I don't.
Was this here before?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Christie, maybe correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think maybe to the extent that we're seeing now, but I'm
Yeah.
sure there's always been some level of.
I think, yes, we didn't, personally, I'd never heard of the behavior issues that we're having now. But you're right, like, relative to the amount of students that are taking it, maybe that contribute. We did not fully fund last year, right?
We did a.
Partial fund?
Partial fund.
Okay.
Yep.
That was absorbed, I mean, or that was fully taken
Utilized,
advantage of.
utilized.
Yep.
Okay. I don't know. I think, I like that we fund it, and I think it's a great program. I would love to see it being, offered as part of our curriculum. But where we can't do that, and we don't do that, I think it's nice that we offer it, free of charge. I'm all for continuing that. I think that, as a service provider, Global Child should be held accountable closely around, what the children are getting out of it, what the program, how do we update the program, or how they're updating the program, what resources are available aside from the CD. Also, making sure we're holding the instructors accountable, but if we also had, I think if we have something in place that says, I don't even know if it's 3 strikes you're out, but if you're not able to, if you're not a willing participant, if you're not, I don't know what that looks like, but if you're not participating in in fact, being disruptive, and, disrupting the learning that's supposed to be happening in that 45 minutes.
Yeah, I think you'd want to keep it,
Yeah.
Similar to other programs that we have, and that's why I kind of go back to play,
Yeah.
something along the lines of like the play.
play,
It's
yep.
something we have already in place.
Yep.
I don't remember that exact document right now, but there's some level of expectation
Yeah.
around, you agree to this, and you're a member of this program, and if these rules aren't followed, these are the things that happen.
Yep. And I would certainly, I would raise my hand and volunteer to work closer with Global Child.
Sure.
If we were gonna continue to even offer the program regardless of whether we pay or not.
Right, and I agree with, the comments around upgrading, and, I think those are all worthy efforts, right? If we're having these conversations around, this model of education that we want to develop across the tri-town, and, we certainly want to make sure all of our partners are equally engaged in that process with us, and, I think that's certainly a follow-up conversation we can have with them as a service provider if, particularly if you're deciding to subsidize it. I think if you're not necessarily subsidizing it, it maybe
Yeah.
holds a little less weight perhaps, but
Yep.
something to think about.
Yep. All right.
So we would need some guidance
Okay.
from the committee as to whether or not you want to subsidize it at all. And Kristen, maybe it's, maybe the next step certainly is a follow-up conversation with you, me, Diana, James, like get the same
Okay.
players back in the room again, and have those sort of bigger program development, now that we've heard from the committee, sort of what their thoughts are, program development, behavior contracts. To me, that can kind of fit in a follow-up meeting with the 4 of us that originally met. But I think we need, from a budgetary perspective, just some guidance from the committee as to whether or not you want to pursue this for the spring, fully, partially, not at all.
Okay.
You have a point of view on this, Fred?
I'm all for funding Global Child, instrumental music, but in this case, I feel maybe, I don't know how long it's been, but I don't want them becoming complacent and just, going
Yeah.
through the motions. And
Yeah.
I kind of feel like the last couple of years, that's kind of how it's been.
Okay.
You mean Global Child has?
Yes.
Yeah. And it sounds like it's partially being taken advantage of for daycare,
After school care.
yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know, do we wanna skip the spring and regroup, or?
What do we have allocated for it?
We had 10 coming out of last FY '19 budget deliberations. We had, done 10, and that was completely used in the fall semester, Mark.
Oh, okay. I remember the 10, I didn't remember what it was. It was just the first semester, so we didn't allocate anything for the second.
No. Yeah, because what is it, about 135 or 38? Something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about the superintendent's discretion not to exceed?
Well, I think it's more a function of, does the committee feel as though it should be at all,
Right, right.
Or what are our options here? None, partial, or?
Full.
Full,
Yeah.
which is,
So none and full become not a conversation, right? It's either 10,000 or nothing.
yeah, yeah.
And then partial becomes, a conversation if it's something that the committee wanted to. It'd be interesting to see if there was none or partial, does enrollment go down?
I'm sure it will.
Yeah, I think it will, and I think it'll weed out some of our behavioral issues, and it'll also let Global Child know that we're
holding them accountable.
Yeah, we're serious about
Yeah.
needing this cutting edge like we are, or we'll find some replacement.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think through, what's their incentive to provide, top instruction, with top instructional providers. And right now, there's none. We're paying them regardless of whether or not,
Right, I
We're
mean,
happy with the
they've
program.
made more money because
Yeah.
they have a
Right.
full,
right,
full
Right.
class now.
right.
Right.
It's almost like we should pay them in increments. Some sort of,
Incentive-based, fluency incentive.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't know what that,
More
that's
testing.
a bigger conversation.
Could hire Pearson to create a new MCAS for.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, God.
I'd be okay with a partial, just, and I don't know if it's $5,000 or you guys, I'm open to your opinions too, but.
I'm at 0 for this semester coming up.
Okay.
Do you want to make a motion?
I don't think we have to make a motion if we're not funding it.
Yeah. I mean,
Okay, does anyone want to make a motion for partially funding Global Child?
I would. Well, do you have an amount? Are you thinking partial?
Yeah, you want to put an amount on it?
So I'll move for a partial funding of $5,000 for the semester.
Anyone second that? Can I second that?
Sure.
Okay, I'll second that.
Discussion? I think we probably had.
Yeah.
So, if we partially fund it, is that now the first 36 kids are free, or is it
Or half.
You
Tuition.
for how many, you know
You
what I
guys could
mean?
dictate those terms. You could say, we had 74 kids enrolled last year, it's probably safe to assume you'd get around the same. So do you 50% fund 74, or do you fully fund 36?
I don't think you'll get
I,
this.
I would do
the
a
74.
partial funding with, full funding for the first 36 kids. Because if you look at the past numbers.
Yeah,
That's about, and that's what averages Boxford and Topsfield.
which is what we
That's their
did
high
before.
number.
That's
Yeah.
how we did before.
Right. So,
Yeah, I'm okay
I
with
don't
that.
know. If you're gonna partial fund it. If not,
Well, that's the motion on the table, so all those, are you guys,
So,
ready to take a vote?
I'll amend
You could amend the motion.
my motion to include Freddie's terminology.
okay.
Full
so
funding
full
for the
funding.
first-
Funding for the,
Up to $5,000.
up to $5,000 for the first 36, or whatever that number comes out to financially.
Okay. All right. Do we have to do all those in favor?
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, do I have to do the second
Yeah,
motion?
get a second on that.
Okay, I'll second that.
So all in favor?
All those in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Nay.
Opposed?
Opposed.
So motion carries 3-1. So motion to, so I just want to make sure I have it, so when I do some follow-up. So Krista, I'm going to set myself a note for you and I to get the group back together and talk about expectations and future and vision and upgrading the program and all that jazz.
Yep.
And then similarly, full funding up to 5,000 for first 36 or so. Okay, great. FY20 budget development is happening. We've heard back from all of our department heads and managers. We are in the process of, Steve has been working on the narrative for the committee, and we will have the narrative and the books out, Steve, to folks when?
Next week sometime.
Next week sometime?
Yeah, I mean, because we're just wrapping up the narrative. Once we finalize it, then we're ready to start putting things together.
Great.
So, yeah, if not the end of this week, which, you know, it just depends how
Fast
fast we can
approaching.
put them together, it would be the beginning of next week. You know, we'll deliver them, we'll drop them off.
And then we have our Saturday budget meeting. Just want to confirm that everybody has the time, 8:30?
8:30, Saturday the 12th.
Saturday the 12th, that's
There.
here. And the agenda is typically, you know, very brief superintendent update, and then, you know, 8:40 to 11:40 is dig in on FY20 budget, and then, you know, 11:40 at the end is any sort of minutes that might need to be approved or any other standard things that we typically do in the meetings. But it's a good 3 hours for us to go through the book, see what the requests are, start the debate, start the deliberation, hear from the committee, you know, what you want to see for the budget for FY20. And you'll be able to hear from the different requests from the different department managers. Matt will be here, Christine will be here, Steve Goditis will be here, I'll be here, and Steve Greenberg will be here as well.
And we're here.
We are in this room, right, not,
Don't go
not
to the
at the
training
PD Center, exactly.
Get locked out.
So that's 8:30 here.
Okay.
And then I don't have, let me find the folder. I don't think we have any correspondence. That's Drive, that's the budget, nope, no correspondence.
Can I have that,
I didn't send it.
No other? Okay. The consent agenda. What's our one, we just
Bills as listed.
approve as listed?
Yes.
Okay.
Mark should read them all for.
Mark, you want to read them? It's
them?
been a while.
It's been a while, Mark.
We've missed you.
Not necessarily.
Oh, come on, Mark.
Sorry, I've missed the last couple meetings.
We're glad you're back.
Okay, we're
Family
back,
health.
yeah.
For old time's sake.
Family health issue.
We are glad you're back.
I don't even know where to find them.
I have it.
Oh,
Steve
you
has a copy.
hard copy?
Do you have a
Do you really want me to read them?
Yes.
All right, number one is a bill warrant dated 1/17/19, BW voucher 1056.
There he is.
$3.14. Number two is a bill warrant dated 1/17/19. Thanks for coming, George. BW voucher 1059, in the amount of
Hi, George.
$35,640.40. Down below, number one's a payroll dated 12/20/18, weeks ending 11/30 and 12/7 of 18, the amount of $349,211.37. Number one also is a payroll dated 1/3/19, weeks ending 12/14/18 and 12/21/18, the amount of $352,228.64. Number two is a bill warrant dated 12/20/18, BW voucher 1048, the amount of $20,825.22. Number three is a bill warrant dated 12/20/18, BW voucher 1049, the amount of $20,554.30. Number four is a bill warrant dated 1/3/19, BW voucher 1055, the amount of $125,458.21. And lastly, Madam Chairperson, stepping in for Amy. The bill warrant dated 12/26/18, BW voucher 1056, in the amount of $3.14 for cafe and meal tax.
Thank you, Mark. Okay. We have to approve this? Okay.
I'll make the motion to approve this as spoken verbally and listed.
Professionally done?
Rapidly.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay.
That's it. Motion to adjourn if there are no other comments.
Wow.
Wants to make that motion?
Moved. So moved.
Second.
Motion to adjourn.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Do I get to?
You do.
Motion.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, guys.